I did some testing on a dog named Mia. It was very, very interesting. And I worked with a company called Animal Biome, which I am going to encourage you guys to write that down, Animal Biome. No, I don't get any money from it. You guys know that. But it was created by a microbiologist named Dr. Holly Gantz, and she formulates these tests that you can do and poop pills. And so she formulated this test and came up with what was considered a good, diverse gut for a dog. And she has one for cats too, but for the dogs was the first one that she came out with. And what she argues is that without a diverse, so it's not about numbers. It's not about I need 4 million of these and 2 million of that and 6 million of this. What it is I need all of these things to make this diverse microbiome, which is your gut that we're talking about specifically. So if you have diversity in your gut, then bad things can't come in and push out good things, and then you end up with all of the bad, when I say things, I mean bacteria. So all of these bad bacteria. So about 1.5 years ago, I worked with a dog named Mia, and we ran a gut microbiome test on her and found this really weird bacteria that I had never heard of. And so I called Dr. Gantz and said, hey, what is this? It's red. It's coming up on her. And Dr. Gantz said, that's an interesting bacteria that is not found. It's non-native to the canine's gut. And it's actually been linked to ulcers of all things in humans. And so I said, me, little researcher Carrie, was like, oh my God, this dog has the most anxiety I've ever seen, and I'd like to do some testing. So I worked with her mom, and we did some fecal transplants on Mia, and we changed her diet and did a few things. And then we reran her tests. And what we found was as that bacteria was going down, it doesn't happen overnight, but as the bacteria's numbers were going down and it was getting pushed out of her gut, the anxiety was also going down. Now, is one little test that Carrie did in Tustin, California, the end-all solution to everything? No. But when you put that along with the research that's going on in the human research, in some of the other researches, and as we start to see that happening more and more with us giving bacterias, and that's also been done at some kennels where they did that as well. They started giving probiotics to dogs in kennel environments to see if they could get the anxiety down. So there is more than just Carrie's Mia story, but I will tell you guys that I absolutely, if you do anything for your pets that are licking their paws, that are showing signs of anxiety, paw licking is not always allergies. I can't stress that enough. In my opinion, paw licking is related to boredom and anxiety, and it becomes a habit. And so they lick their paw because they're bored, and then they're like, oh, that felt kind of good. And so it becomes this habit, and then they just do it all the time until they leave sores on themselves, and they just they become very conditioned. Animals are creatures of habit. We all know that. They're times, you guys all know that. Just if you live in a state where the time changes, if it's the time changed to 6 o'clock, they don't care. They still want to eat at 5. Animals are creatures of habit. And so when things change in their environment, it can cause some stress, and then they find things to get rid of those stresses, and then those things become habits. Paw licking is one of them. And so if you do anything out of this video, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. Get your pet on a fecal transplant. It's an FMT pill. You can get it from Animal Biome. I think there's some other places doing it as well right now, but I'm not sure. But consider doing a fecal transplant for your dogs. And secondly, get your pets off kibble. I cannot stress that. You cannot expect an animal to get rid of anxiety if you're feeding a non-soluble carbohydrate food to your pet. So all kibble has tons of carbohydrate in it. It can't be made without it. Non-soluble carbohydrates turn to sugar. Sugar increases what? Our anxiety. So those are the 2 things you absolutely have to do. The rest of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about is going to be much different. But let's talk about kibble. Question.
I've heard that dogs need crunchy foods. Dogs need kibble. Dogs need, so...
Yeah.
People are, I guess, are trained too to know that.
Absolutely,
they're supposed to think that.
That is absolutely an argument that we hear all the time.
That to keep their teeth strong, if it's all wet or food or something, their teeth fall out. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest arguments, is that my dog has to have some crunchy food in order to keep his teeth clean. So I understand where that came from. It came from marketing, but for someone like me, I giggle a little bit about it because, and I'm not laughing at people who are listening to it, because it made sense to me once upon a time too. I used to tell people that argument, honest to God. Back when I was a vet tech, I would say, oh no, you can't just feed can, you have to feed kibble because it cleans their teeth. But as I've continued to educate myself, I realize now that 90% of the dogs that I take care of are on kibble and their teeth are rotting out of their head. They are constantly having these teeth problems. And so why does that happen? So, real quick, let me just tell you a little something that a dental hygienist, animal dental hygienist told me one time. We were talking about that very thing. And he said, and I use this all the time now because it makes me giggle. He says, wouldn't that be like a dentist telling you that if you want to clean your teeth, you should chew on a Chips Ahoy cookie? And I laugh because I'm like, oh my God, it's true, because kibble has so much sugar in it. They can't make it without it. It has to have the sugar in it. So it would be like cleaning your teeth with a Chips Ahoy cookie.
And it just sits in there.
But it's worse than it is for humans, and this is why. So there's a enzyme called amylase that is released in our pancreases and in our mouth. When we eat, it breaks down carbohydrates in our food. That's what that exact enzyme is supposed to do. So we release it in our mouth when we start to eat. So you'll know what I'm talking about when you eat a piece of bread and it tastes a little bit a little bit sweet. That is amylase being released into your mouth and breaking down the sugars and the starches that are in that bread. Dogs do not release that until they hit. Their pancreas does it. It starts to release it in their pancreas. And so anything they eat that has sugar or starch can just sit in their mouths and it's not broken down in their mouths. So while they may swallow it, the little bit of that stuff gets left on their teeth and it doesn't get broken down, which is why kibble-fed dogs always have worse teeth than dogs who are eating whole, fresh, non-soluble carbohydrate foods, because they don't have all that sugar in their mouth.